KWIK TUTS.
Hello everyone! I've always wanted to make this tutorial for quite a long time since I finished this project last year, and I finally found some time to make it. What you are seeing is a short segment from a medical product demo where a cell splits into two. In this video, I'm going to break down how I modeled and animated the cell in a non-destructive way from start to finish. So here's the animation open in Blender, and you can see how it looks like in viewport shading. I'm going to hide everything else and focus only on the cell. Let's start right at the beginning with all the modifiers turned off. As you can see, the cell is actually just a cube, so here's a good reason to not delete the default cube. It is parented to an empty at the world's origin, and I've animated it to move to one side. This empty is quite important as it allows me the freedom to rotate the entire cell without having to reanimate the camera, and it acts as the reference for my mirror modifier, which I'll get to later. The first modifier is the subdivision surface to make it round, pretty straightforward. Next up is the simple deform modifier, and I've selected stretch to animate the cell squash and stretch as it pulls away from the center during the split. By dragging this slider along the x-axis, you can see how well it deforms and still retain the size and volume of the cell. So what I did was just keyframing this slider manually to get the bounciness effect as the cell moves to the side. Next, I used the mirror modifier to create the opposite half. As mentioned previously, I used the empty as the mirroring reference. The settings again are pretty straightforward. I want it to mirror along the x-axis, then bisect it to cut it along the mirror's plane, and flip it to use the correct half. The displace modifier is then used to add some irregular bumps with the Voronoi map. This helps to break the symmetry and make the cell look more interesting. I then gave it another subdivision modifier to smoothen out the entire model even more, because we can see some artifacts in the middle during the split due to insufficient geometry. The dynamic paint modifier is then added to achieve this bubbly ripple effect, and this is what helps sell the illusion the most. The cell is set as the canvas with these settings, while I have a small sphere in the middle to act as the brush. What happens is that when the cell splits and the surface collides with the brush in the middle, it will create a wave that makes it look bubbly when the cells separate. Pretty cool, huh? The second displace modifier is added to give the overall cell some more texture on the surface. Last but not least, the solidify modifier is used to give the cell a little thickness, and this helps with the rendering in order to achieve the right look. Now that you know how the cell is animated, let's take a look at the nucleus. It's basically animated the same way as the cell, but without the dynamic paint. As for the smaller particles, they are made of multiple cubes that were subdivided. The trick here is to boolean it into half with a cube in the middle. Because it is parented to the cell, when it moves with it, it looks like new particles are forming in the middle as the boolean reveals the hidden particles. The rest of the modifiers function the same like what I did with the nucleus and the cell. But I exaggerated the last displace modifier so that I get this organic deformation when it's moving. Then I duplicated the particles and inverted the boolean to get the other half. Since I don't have anything to parent this half of the particles to move the opposite direction, I used the driver to reference its location based on the cell's location, but multiplied it with -1 to get the opposite value. This way, the location of the particles will be exactly mirrored to the other half when the cell is animated. And that's how I animated the cell splitting segment. The takeaway here is that modeling and animating non-destructively allows me to make any changes conveniently. You could change the surface displacement texture if you want, make it bigger or smaller, add more particles. You can take it even further by making another split from 2 to 4 cells along the y-axis, and so on and on and on. All it needs is a little bit of planning and knowing what you need for the animation. So yeah, I hope you learned a trick or two from this video. Until next time, thank you for watching, save your file, and I'll see you in the next video.
Hi! Subscribe!